the Indiana Fever beat the Dallas Wings 102-83. This was a highly anticipated game because it was going to be the first time that Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers would be going up against one another in the WNBA.
Imagine the roar of 17,000 fans caught in a single held breath, because tonight, the rookie everyone doubted just grabbed the play-calling reins and hurled them at destiny. One half-court chess match, one explosive 36-point quarter, and suddenly every critic's hot take feels like yesterday's news. But before the scoreboard melted and records fell, a single question hovered over the hardwood. What happens when the league's most polarizing newcomer finally gets to run her offense her way? Against the rival who's shadowed her since high school? Stick around, because the answer didn't just silence the doubters. It rewrote the WNBA's future in real time. They were scarcely out of driver ed when gym rafters began shaking beneath their jump shots. Caitlin Clark, a Des Moines firecracker who could splash logo threes like practice layups, and Paige Bueckers, Minneapolis's smooth-as-glass assassin whose mid-range pull-up felt pre-written in slow motion. Coaches on the AAU circuit whispered the same prediction. Whichever girl figured out pressure first would set the other's ceiling. Their first real collision came at a packed Midwest showcase. Bleachers overloaded, college scouts elbow to elbow, everyone scribbling the same two names in ink. Clark opened with a 27-foot dagger that bounced twice off the rim before surrendering. Bueckers answered on the very next trip, shredding two defenders with a no-look dime that drew audible gasps. By halftime, they'd combined for 34 points, 3 steals, and a viral clip of Clark barking, "Run it back," while Bueckers just grinned and tapped her chest. Your move. Recruiting rankings tried slotting them into neat tiers. Clark number 4, Bueckers number 1, but the numbers never captured style. Clark played offense like a jailbreak. Pace, panic, and push the ball before the defense exhales. Bueckers resembled jazz, pauses, pivots, then a sudden sixth note no one heard coming. Even their personalities clashed in perfect harmony. Clark, the unapologetic gunslinger, Bueckers, the quiet surgeon who let box scores speak. Off-court, they exchanged DM jokes about who owed who a smoothie after games, yet every shared tournament hotel felt electrically charged. Two comets streaking the same sky, destined to cross or collide. Local newsrooms amplified the dual narrative. Iowa's long-range renegade versus Minnesota's ice-veined maestro. National outlets followed, dripping comparisons to Bird Magic and Taurasi Diggins before either girl had finished sophomore biology. Parents felt the spotlight too. Ann Clark recalls slipping into gyms 2 hours early, just for a seat that wasn't behind a pillar. Bob Bueckers says he learned to gauge interest by how many rival coaches suddenly needed a bathroom break whenever Paige began warm-ups. With each sellout showcase, the myth grew taller than any scoreboard. Yet rivalry thrives on imbalance. And in those early meetings, Clark's raw volume sometimes drowned out Bueckers' efficient brushstrokes. One December night in Cedar Rapids, Clark erupted for 42, including 9 triples so deep the baseline photographer shifted just to keep her in frame. A month later in St. Paul, Bueckers responded with a pristine 28-10-8 line, notching the win and murmuring afterward, "We'll see her again." Fans realized these games weren't ending chapters. They were signposts on a road neither phenom could exit. By senior year, travel team directors practically scheduled around the possibility of Clark versus Bueckers. Livestream numbers spiked. Shoe brand reps hovered courtside with prototype deals tucked in backpacks. And every handshake line closed the same way. A brief smile, a shoulder bump, and an unspoken promise that this was only prologue. Because scholarships were signed, college choices locked. And the next encounter would unfold under brighter lights, March brackets, national TV slots, and roaring student sections itching to crown a queen. But that chapter belongs to someone called Destiny. And destiny was still waiting in the wings. College was supposed to separate myth from measurement, and it did. Just not the way the experts predicted. Paige Bueckers chose royalty, slipping into UConn's trophy-lined halls like a born heir. Gino Auriemma greeted her with stories of banners and balance, promising to sculpt her game into something inevitable. Caitlin Clark went the opposite direction. A wind-swept Iowa City campus starving for national respect. Reporters called it a gamble, but Clark shrugged. She didn't come to borrow someone else's throne. Their divergent paths set the bracket on a collision course. Freshman year, Bueckers glided through Big East defenses with a surgeon's calm, stacking 30-point nights that felt effortless. Meanwhile, Clark fired triple-double salvos in the rugged Big Ten, leading the nation in scoring and three-pointers launched from somewhere near the half-court logo. Analysts debated whose numbers were real, whose competition was soft, whose ceiling was higher. Social media, of course, declared every debate a civil war. The first tournament meeting came in the Sweet 16, a neutral site that felt anything but. Clark entered waving her signature three-finger salute. UConn students answered with a wall of whiteboards reading, "Way out of your range." For 2 quarters, it seemed prophetic. Clark forced shots. Iowa trailed by double digits, and Gino's sideline grin grew wider. Then Clark adjusted the scope. She dished instead of drilled, feeding Monica Chinano until UConn's help defense sagged. When the Huskies finally pinched the paint, Clark detonated from deep. A 72 run flipped the score, stunned the arena, and stamped her first collegiate victory over Bueckers. The post-game handshake was brief but electric. Rivalry upgraded from rumor to fact. A season later, Bueckers evened the ledger in the Elite Eight. Rocking a protective knee brace that made every pivot look precarious, she authored a near-flawless 28-10-8 masterpiece, sending Iowa packing and silencing Clark's 30-footer attempts with a cascading box-and-one defense. Poise beat power, one commentator crowed. Twitter rejoiced at the restored balance, but the rubber match still loomed. That deciding duel, 2024's regional final, belongs in museum lighting. Clark erupted for 41-8-6, carpeting the court in logo daggers while taunting UConn's halftime adjustments with wry smiles. Bueckers countered with 27 and 11 dimes, but the scoreboard read Iowa by 11 when confetti rained. It wasn't just a win. It was a statement that raw flames could outshine polished marble. Cameras caught Gino's curt handshake and Diana Taurasi's courtside remark. Fun in college, sure, but the pros will humble her. That soundbite ping-ponged across sports shows for weeks, framing Clark as a brilliant but undisciplined gunslinger, unfit for WNBA battlegrounds. Clark's response? Nothing but stat lines. By the time she declared for the draft, she owned 2 Naismiths, back-to-back scoring crowns, and the tournament's single-game assist record. Bueckers, for her part, had stitched her own legend. Wooden Award, a pair of Final Four banners, and efficiency numbers that made analytics disciples swoon. They left campus tied 2-1 in head-to-head showdowns, but forever bound by highlight reels that looped on every sports feed. Yet trophies don't travel. In the WNBA, you start at 0. Draft nights scattered them to opposite poles. Clark to an Indiana franchise desperate for resurrection, Bueckers to Dallas amid sky-high expectations. Pundits sharpened their takes. Could Clark's heat-check habits survive bigger, faster defenders? Would Bueckers' surgical rhythm translate once those defenders closed space in half a heartbeat? Gino remained skeptical on air. Taurasi doubled down, hinting that Clark's welcome to the league moment would be uncomfortable. The stage was set. College score settled, hype oxygen thick, reputations wobbling under the weight of prophecy. All that remained was the first professional clash, where playbooks, paychecks, and pride would finally share the same parquet. And that confrontation was closer than anyone realized. The WNBA did not roll out a red carpet for Caitlin Clark. It tossed her into a buzzsaw of scouting reports and bruising closeouts. 12 games into her rookie campaign, Indiana sat a wobbly 10-10. Clark nursed a stubborn groin strain, her hallmark step-back short-circuiting into back-rim clangs. Opponents face-guarded her the moment she crossed half-court, daring anyone else in a fever jersey to beat them. Meanwhile, Coach Stephanie White preached patience. Slow the pace, value possessions, run deliberate sets. It felt like stuffing lightning into a mason jar. Clark chafed. Her best highlights were born in chaos. One-hand outlets that turned rebounds into layups before scorekeepers could log the rebound. Fans begged for that breakneck style. White countered with film sessions pointing to turnovers and transition miscues. The tension finally boiled over during a nationally televised loss to Atlanta. Cameras caught Clark waving off a called play, White barking back, and a halftime tunnel exchange that trended on every platform within minutes. Indiana won the game, but the philosophical fracture was now public. Across the conference, Paige Bueckers adjusted to pro-life with quieter turbulence. Dallas handed her the keys to an offense already stocked with scoring options, and she responded with 18-plus points on surgical efficiency. No viral outbursts, no open dissent, just box scores that looked eerily similar to her UConn days. Yet the Wings staggered too, losing 6 of 8 as chemistry hiccups and defensive lapses piled up. In pressers, Bueckers spoke softly about trusting the process, but reporters sensed urgency behind the calm. All of this brewed into the perfect storm when the schedule placed Dallas at Indiana in late June. ABC grabbed the broadcast slot within hours, billing it as the long-awaited pro chapter of a rivalry America already knew by heart. Ticket prices ballooned on resale sites. Fever PR staff fielded interview requests from outlets that hadn't covered women's basketball in years. Talk show pundits dusted off the old college comparisons. Would Clark's volume shooting implode against WNBA length? Could Bueckers' mid-range magic survive the league's analytics wave favoring threes and layups? Inside Indiana's practice facility, the atmosphere was combustible. Clark lobbied assistants for quicker outlet drills, arguing that a team featuring Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston was built to sprint, not crawl. White wrestled with data showing the Fever's turnover rate spiked whenever possessions sped up. On the eve of the matchup, she surprised everyone. Practice opened with transition work, 3-second decision rules, and a mandate to run until your lungs quit, then run some more. Whether it was a genuine philosophical pivot or a strategic olive branch, players felt the shift instantly. Dallas arrived with its own agenda: be physical, crowd Clark off the ball, test her patience. Bueckers downplayed the rivalry narrative at shoot-around, yet teammates confessed they'd never seen her so dialed in. Paige speaks with her eyes when something matters, one veteran said. Today, her stare could cut glass. Pre-game buzz felt less like mid-season WNBA and more like a Final Four Saturday night. Courtside seats filled with NBA stars, college coaches, and camera crews chasing the next viral clip. The public storyline revolved around Clark versus Bueckers, but a deeper question simmered beneath. Could Clark's freewheeling tempo survive professional defenses, or would White's earlier caution prove prophetic? Tip-off loomed, tension thick enough to taste. As the horn sounded, Clark caught the ball, glanced at White, and saw a barely perceptible nod. Green light granted. She burst up court, Paige shadowing her stride for stride. Two former prodigies about to decide whose theory of basketball would own the night. And in the space of a single quarter, that nod would become the hinge on which an entire franchise, and perhaps the next chapter of the WNBA, would swing. The opening tip felt like the moment a thunderhead decides whether to crack open or drift away. For 7 measured minutes, the game behaved. Dallas funneled the ball through Paige Bueckers. Indiana moved it through set after set, and the scoreboard inched along as if wary of scandal. Clark probed but didn't force, testing wing defenders with soft bounce entries to Aaliyah Boston and a pair of probing drives that ended in crisp kickouts. Each time she glanced sideline, Coach White answered with the same subtle nod, keep running. Bueckers countered with her trademark economy. One dribble pull-ups, a backdoor dime that left even Clark clapping, reminding everyone why she once wore the crown of college composure. The quarter closed 24-23 Fever, a polite handshake of a start that hinted at neither avalanche nor meltdown. Then the second quarter cracked wide open like a fault line under pressure. It started innocently enough. Clark threading a 90-foot laser to Natasha Howard streaking past half court. The basket counted, but more important was the subtext. Indiana's throttle had no governor tonight. On the very next possession, Clark sprinted off a defensive board, bypassed a safe outlet, and arrowed a one-hand hook across 2 defenders to Kelsey Mitchell in the corner. Triple. Crowd stood. Dallas called time. But whatever adjustment coach Latricia Trammell scribbled could not match the Fever's new gear. Clark's eyes burned with that unmistakable sees-everything glare. Every miss became a runway, every rebound a jailbreak. Midway through the quarter, she flipped a no-look over her shoulder to Boston, rumbling down the lane. Finish plus foul, and suddenly confetti cannons felt appropriate. With each possession, Clark tallied a new way to bend space. A soccer-style lead pass that landed perfectly in Sophie Cunningham's stride, a skip bounce through a defender's legs that pulled an involuntary gasp from the broadcast booth, a cross-court sling that arrived so fast, Mitchell barely had time to cock the wrist before launching. Dallas tried brute force. They bodied Clark off pin downs, tugged at her jersey on curls, blitzed hard on every screen. She answered by becoming water, slipping pressure, skipping behind the double, carving them up with touch passes that hit teammates in rhythm instead of panic. The Wings' gambit collapsed into 33-9 devastation in under 8 minutes. By the time the scoreboard flashed 60-40, Clark had logged 9 assists, 4 steals, and an effortless 7 points, all without breaking her smile. The arena shifted from anticipation to disbelief. Indiana was painting a masterpiece in high gear, and Dallas could not locate the breaks. Mitchell's hot hand raged, 8 of 12 by intermission, including a transition pull-up that left Bueckers shaking her head in grudging awe. Boston punished every late switch. Howard ran the floor like a sprinter freed from ankle weights, and Cunningham piled on a pair of heat-check floaters just to hammer the message home. The Fever closed the half with 64 points, one more than any Indiana team had ever poured into 20 minutes and the highest single half total by any club all season. Clark jogged to the tunnel with 13 assists, her ponytail whipping as she exchanged a knowing glance with White. Lightning in the open, proof on the board. Yet the story wasn't just numbers, it was texture. Clark barked rotations on defense, then spun to intercept passing lanes like she'd previewed the playbook. One swipe at Arike Ogunbowale led to a touchdown outlet that split two red jerseys by centimeters. Another steal forced Bueckers into an uncharacteristic bailout pass that sailed out of bounds. Frustration etched across her usually placid face. Every Fever runout doubled as psychological warfare. Dallas no longer trusted its half-court sets, and Indiana's players no longer wondered whether the fast break could survive the pros. They were living inside its jet stream. Halftime buzz was all sizzle and what-ifs. Commentators scrambled for historical comps, fans fumbled phones to tweet eye emoji strings, and a certain pair of retired legends, Taurasi among them, leaned back courtside, suddenly unsure of earlier predictions. Above the din, Clark's measured grin suggested unfinished business. After all, the records falling tonight were only a prelude. There were still 20 minutes left to decide how large the crater of her statement would be. And somewhere inside that electric pause lurked the next revelation, because the third quarter would ask a different question entirely. Could Dallas claw back before the rout became a reckoning? Or was this the night the rivalry officially tilted for good? Basketball history usually announces itself with a roar. On this night, it arrived on a quiet fifth steal. Early in the third quarter, Dallas tried one last surge, trapping Clark at midcourt, pushing the tempo through Paige Bueckers, gambling that momentum could blunt the avalanche. Instead, Clark baited a lazy swing pass, flashed into the lane, and picked it clean with fingertips so quick the ball barely changed height. The moment she secured possession, she pivoted and fired a laser 60 feet ahead to Sophie Cunningham, who finished before the Wings' defense had fully turned. Whistles blared, benches rose, and the arena's decibel meter spiked past safe levels. That steal completed a stat line: 14 points, 13 assists, 5 steals, that only one player in league history had ever posted twice, Caitlin Clark herself. Context deepened the feat. Her first 14-13-5 masterpiece had come weeks earlier against Seattle, framed as a once-in-a-generation outlier. Repeating it tonight confirmed it was repeatable art, not accidental brushstrokes. No rookie, no veteran, nobody, not Taurasi, not Sue Bird, had duplicated that exact combination even once. Clark had now done it in just 25 professional starts, placing her in a statistical zip code she occupies alone. Analysts scrambled for parallels, but the query returned a single name: milestones stacked like dominoes. By night's end, she became the fastest player ever to eclipse 200 points and 100 assists in a rookie season, doing so in a dozen games, 2 contests quicker than the previous record. The broadcast truck flashed an on-screen graphic comparing her early career pace to Chris Paul's NBA rookie assist rate, and social media answered with side-by-sides of Clark's logo threes and no-look passes under the caption, "Point Guard 2.0. Yet numbers tell only half the story. Defense painted the richer portrait. Clark floated through passing lanes with a chess player's foresight, anticipating skip-outs and timing digs at the high post so perfectly that Dallas guards began second-guessing even routine reversals. Her single block, a volleyball swat of Jordan Canada's driving floater, ignited a 3-on-1 break she finished with a behind-the-back feed to Cunningham, a sequence replayed on loop across every sports app within the hour. The collateral damage was brutal. Erica Ogunbowale, Dallas's microwave scorer, finished 0 for 10 and looked visibly rattled, tugging her jersey's collar as another Clark deflection skittered out of bounds. Bueckers, who opened the night with cool mid-range daggers, managed just 4 second-half points under the blanket of Indiana's help rotations. Rotations Clark orchestrated with audible commands while still tallying offensive orchestration on the fly. By the 4-minute mark, camera shots of the Wings' bench caught players trading resigned shrugs. When the final horn sealed a 100-83 demolition, fans lingered as though the court itself might sprout encore highlights. Clark shared a brief embrace with Bueckers. Respect, not rivalry, concluded, then jogged to half-court where Coach White waited, arms crossed in an I-told-you-so grin that Clark answered with a single satisfied nod. Microphones caught her post-game summary. Basketball's faster when everyone's invited to the party. Reporters noted that even White laughed at the line. In press row, laptops clacked furiously. Rookie makes history. Again, on set, pundits who once parroted volume shooter, limited ceiling, flipped their scripts in real time. And somewhere in the tunnel, Indiana equipment staff tucked away a game ball destined glass case immortality. But the buzzer's echo was only the beginning. Headlines would dissect philosophy shifts, locker room chemistry, and what this performance meant for the league's tempo wars. For the Fever, a tougher question loomed. Could they bottle lightning for a looming Connecticut-New York road gauntlet? Or was this wild freedom a one-night spectacular? The answer? And the inevitable fallout for Dallas would unfurl in the days to come. Because once a rookie rewrites the record book twice, every next chapter reads like prophecy in progress. Beneath the still buzzing rafters, the first microphone found Paige Bueckers. She answered 2 routine questions in her composed Yukon cadence. Then a reporter poked the rivalry wound. Did it feel personal watching Clark set another record on your floor? A rare flash of irritation crossed Bueckers' face. Personal? It felt fast, she said, letting the word hang like a challenge before requesting the next topic. The clip rocketed across X within minutes. Half the comments praised her poise. The other half called it a concession speech without the tears. Down the hall, Caitlin Clark wrapped her post-game scrum by redirecting credit. 30 assists isn't one player. That's trust multiplied, she insisted, tapping a stat sheet dotted with double-figure scoring lines. Yet even while championing teammates, she couldn't hide the quiet satisfaction of proving the skeptics wrong. One reporter asked whether the tempo debate with Coach White was settled. Clark smirked. Tempo talk tonight. We just listened. Coach White's own presser sounded like a pivot wrapped in diplomacy. She praised the roster's conditioning, noted that defense drives the break, and hinted the Fever had rediscovered their DNA. A journalist pressed her on whether the full-throttle approach would stick for upcoming tests in Connecticut and New York. White shrugged, half grin forming. When the engine purrs, you don't switch out the fuel. Television studios scrambled to rewrite rundowns. Pundits who once labeled Clark an inefficient flamethrower now coined terms like situational savant and pace oracle. ESPN cut a split-screen montage. On one side, Gino Auriemma's pre-draft critique. On the other, Clark's 13th assist whizzing past 3 frozen defenders. Even Diana Taurasi, who had warned of a rude awakening, joked on air that the rookie had apparently hit the snooze button, and we all paid for it. The narrative shifted in real time. If Clark's game could bend professional defenses to her speed, the league itself might tilt toward transition over half-court grinds. Writers dubbed the moment WNBA 3.0, a stylistic inflection point powered by a rookie's audacity. Back in Dallas, coaches dissected film well past midnight. Arike Ogunbowale texted teammates a vow to erase that 0 for 10 like it never happened, while franchise brass mulled rotation tweaks to keep pace with the new-look Fever. Privately, one Wings assistant admitted Clark had exposed our cardio and our closeouts in the same breath. The next meeting, circled in bold on everyone's calendars, felt less like a rematch and more like a referendum on adaptation. Social feeds by morning told a simpler story. Highlight packages racking millions of views, merch shops slapping CC record breaker on rush print tees, and ticket demand for Indiana's East Coast swing spiking 40% overnight. Kids filmed driveway imitations of Clark's touchdown passes, adding a shouted, "Run with me" for flourish. The league, sensing momentum, teased a documentary miniseries titled Rivals Reborn, and you could guess the featured faces. Inside the Fever locker room, however, celebration cooled into resolve. Veteran Kelsey Mitchell reminded reporters the season's midpoint still loomed. "Records are markers, not destinations," she said, lacing up recovery boots. Clark nodded in agreement, already icing knees while replaying defensive rotations on a tablet. Because legacy isn't built on one incandescent night. It's forged on how a team carries that light into the next hostile arena. The bus to Indianapolis Airport pulled away under midnight rain, headlights slicing puddles into shimmering lines. Ahead waited Connecticut's bruising posts, New York's swarming traps, and every coach now game planning to throttle the brake before it starts. But somewhere near the back row, Clark tapped another note into her phone. Same title as every entry since AAU days. Next Prove It moment. After a night that bent the league's axis, she knew the proving never truly ends. Only the stakes keep climbing. Road games reveal what highlight nights hide. 2 days after the Dallas demolition, the Fever will step onto Connecticut's parquet, where the Suns' front line treats the paint like a private toll road. No easy layups, no free rebounds. It's a laboratory built perfectly to test Indiana's new gospel of speed. Will Coach White keep the throttle wide open if Alyssa Thomas starts wagging a finger at every fast break attempt? Or does she downshift at the first sign of rough terrain? Clark insists the answer is pace layered onto patience. We run on makes, we run on misses, and if the lane closes, we move the ball until it cracks. Easier said than done against a defense that ranks top 3 in deflections and loves to drag opponents into half-court mud. 48 hours later comes New York, a Liberty squad that presses full court like it was reverse-engineered from Clark's own blueprint. Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and Betnijah Laney might be the only trio in the league comfortable sprinting possession for possession with Indiana's newfound tempo. The marquee subplot? Liberty assistant coach Sandy Brondello has spent the last week splicing together every Fever transition clip she can find, determined to show defenders how to tag the rim runner without losing track of Clark's orbit. If Indiana's break turns sloppy, a 10-0 swing can materialize before the Fever finish tying sneakers. Meanwhile, Dallas retreats to film recovery of its own. Rumor leaks suggest heavier minutes for perimeter stopper Satu Sabali when she returns from injury, an explicit counter to Clark's sideline-to-sideline view of the court. The Wings also flirt with a full-time two-point guard lineup, hoping to match playmaking with playmaking next encounter. It's a reminder that every revolution sparks a counter-revolution. The league won't watch Indiana sprint unchallenged for long. Ticket markets already reflect the tension. Secondary prices for the Fever Sun game jumped 38% overnight. Liberty seats climbed even higher once broadcasters hinted at moving the contest to national primetime. Merchandise vendors can barely keep Run With Me tees in stock. Social algorithms reward the chaos. Clips of Clark's one-hand bullet passes spliced with Bueckers' terse presser quote keep surfacing under the caption, "Rivalry Reloaded." Inside Indiana's locker room, the mood is equal parts adrenaline and alchemy. Veterans like Kelsey Mitchell preach balance. Celebrate the win, but hydrate, stretch, reset. Rookies watch Clark's film sessions, noting how she now narrates each possession, pointing out defender hips, timing lobs in thin air with her finger. She's not just chasing highlights anymore. She's teaching speed as a science. That leadership shift could matter more than any record if the Fever hope to shift from exciting to elite. Yet the biggest unknown hovers 20 games beyond any box score: playoff seeding. If Indiana's turbocharged identity sticks, they could leapfrog into a top 4 slot, forcing higher seeds to confront pace on a 5-game series stage. Conversely, a stumble on this road swing might embolden critics who still cling to the flash without finish narrative. Every possession, every sprint lane, feels like a small vote in a larger referendum on modern WNBA basketball. One certainty remains: the next chapter will not be written at a jog. Whether Connecticut slows them, New York matches them, or Dallas devises the blueprint to reverse engineer them, the Fever's future now travels at Clark's velocity. And anything that moves that fast guarantees one thing: nobody watching will look away.